Welcome to another AVID Chat. David Harpool and Jack Arnold, as always, good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you. What's the weather like today?
I don't want to tell you. I'm afraid those Northerners watching. Actually, I think I talked to my mother. She's in Ohio. I think it's actually pretty warm there. But yeah, sunny and gorgeous, as always.
As always.
Gotta love this time of year. All right, so what's on your mind? I think you have actually something to share, something you read about by a well-known person, at least in the financial industry, if not maybe in the world.
Well, yeah, he's definitely one person. It's more so I'm going to try to finagle this in a way that it speaks to like an individual kind of decision-making process. But to start from like a business standpoint, and I think it's helpful sometimes to compare a business and how a business would operate to your personal. It's like almost like your personal business in some sense, like you as David Incorporated, for example. So the general concept is like capital allocation, which is just a fancy way of saying like, where do you invest your money essentially? So like capital allocation from a business standpoint is, where do you as a CEO, let's say, put your profit? So if you make whatever your profit margin is, what do you do with that profit once you have it in the bank? You make a product, it costs $50, you sell it for $70. What do you do with that other $20? And, Warren Buffett, he's big on this. His general thought is the difference between like an average CEO and a great CEO is their capital allocation skill.
Interesting.
How good are they at taking the profits of the business, reinvesting it back into the business to get a better return? So they're getting, 15, 20% returns on reinvestment into the business, essentially. That's how you compound a business over time. That's the most efficient way. So, for example, a capital allocation decision would be like a dividend. Like if you make profit and you don't know what to do with it because you can't get a better return on it, you pay it out to the shareholders. Sometimes you can buy back stock. These are all capital allocation decisions. Where this money that it generated, where's the best place to put the money I can get the best return? Sometimes that's reinvest in R&D, or it doesn't even really matter, number of things.
If you're manufacturing, maybe it's better equipment or something.
Correct. If I spend $10,000 on this thing, and will it pay me $4,000 a year in additional profit, let's say, or something like that? Like that's the kind of decisions that you're going to be making. So you can apply that. It is applicable to your personal situation. You can think of your profit margin as your savings rate in some sense. So if you're saving 20%, you have a 20% profit margin, which would be pretty healthy. What do you do with that profit would be the thing to think about. So, there's always invested in the stock market. Sure. That's definitely one to do. And it's certainly, as far as like a hurdle rate, it's pretty high. Let's say that's 8%. However, there are things that you could say, well, what other options do I have to invest this money that would therefore compound my wealth over time? And there's any number of things that it could be. So an example would be, if you're in a field where, and this isn't every field, but if you're in a field and your profession is one that if you get an additional degree or a credential or some kind of whatever it may be, that there's almost like this equals this. It's pretty straightforward. So like back in the day, if you got an MBA, it was basically like that. I think that's kind of gone away, but it's not eliminated, of course. There's still some of that. But there are certain professions where it's like if you get the next level up, a master's degree in this particular profession, it's an immediate upgrade in pay. You get other things. So like going from a nurse to a nurse practitioner or something along those lines.
Sure.
So taking that profit margin, let's say, and reinvesting it into additional education, where if it costs you $30,000 to go to school, which is not cheap, but then the next time you get a job, you get a $30,000 raise in perpetually for the rest of your life, and plus all the raises that come along with it. That's a great investment. That may be a better place to be spending the money versus putting it in the stock market, let's say. So it's really,
I would argue it would be, because the thing about the stock market, even if you were to say on average, let's say 20 or 30 years, you could get 8%, let's even 6, whatever it is, you don't know until you actually go through it. You don't have a whole lot of control out of that. right? You can control how much you're saving towards it. But in your example, if I'm going to give myself a master's degree or whatever it is, and that can produce an additional several $1,000s a month that is better than for my overall well-being, and I'm going to do that for 20, 30 years just by working hard and being abreast with what opportunities are out there with different employers, that could have a huge impact.
That's right. Yeah. So it's just if you just look at it from I'm a CEO of my personal business, where's the best place to be investing this money so that it will grow over time? You have to be honest with yourself as to if it is a good investment. It's not just spending that you're disguising as investment. How am I going to invest this to grow my wealth over time, and having a little bit of an open mind about it? You may end up at some point defaulting to just adding to your, whether it's a 401k or just investment account, because that's just the best place you'll get the best return. But there are things, depending on the situation, where it might be better off to do that. So whether that's you have credit card debt or any of these number of things where it's actually a little bit more beneficial to allocate your capital in those things than it is just to buy, let's say, stocks or something like that.
So it's almost like looking at your current situation and what you're doing to see if there's ways that you can increase your savings rate or improve your cash flow so that you have the ability to redirect it somewhere. But I don't know, what if you're in a profession that you don't have that ability? Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Maybe you're a business owner and getting a master's degree in your business. Well, it might be a cool label and people might think, oh, wow, Jack got his master's, but is it going to pay you more? I don't know.
Yeah, right. That's a good question. I think, let's say you were a business owner, I mean, that's going back up the chain and saying, well, I have a business. Like, are there things where I could really allocate my capital to improve my business that would actually have some kind of return on investment that would be better than, say, putting it in the stock market or something along those lines? And sometimes there is, but sometimes there isn't. I think that there's I think a lot of service businesses where you have a skill and you're selling that skill for a fee, let's say, a lot of times there's not additional things that you can do. A lot of times the best thing to do is simply pay yourself out the money or invest in the stock market, just because there's only so, like if you're an attorney, let's say, and you're selling your services by the hour or whatever, there's only so many hours in the day. So you are at some point going to bump up against, I only have so many hours. You could raise the price. There's all these things, but none of those things require capital to do that. We have clients that have run online businesses. There's they're not super capital intensive, at doubling what you're spending on whatever it may be. It doesn't really give you any return. It's more just, getting better at what you're doing. So you have excess cash and then you have to find a place to put it that doesn't interfere with the thing that's actually making you money. So sometimes it is just put it in stock. So maybe that's like a convoluted answer. So it's more just, I have a profit margin, business or personal. I want to have a healthy profit margin if it's 20%. And then how do I allocate this money so that I can compound it over time? So this is like I said, this is Warren Buffett's saying. I'm sure lots of people would say this, but he's kind of a name, and I like to bring him up as often as possible. And then there's two books. There's actually two books that talk a lot about this. So one is The Outsiders, which is just a book that talks about different businesses and capital allocation to business. It's actually not a huge book, and it's kind of broken down by chapter into different companies. It's very interesting. So it's good to read through, kind of start thinking about those things. And the other one is called The Rebel Allocator, which is more of like story form, where it's a story about a younger person who has an older mentor, and it kind of runs them through the business of kind of allocating capital, which is it's also a pretty easy read. So if you want to get some more info.
I think those are two great resources. We'll share them. I think it's interesting as, just give this more thought, how important the preface to all this becomes, which is, what am I really doing? Right? What am I trying to do? Like if you use like the nurse who's thinking about staying in the field, but also wants to be rewarded financially and what things would work. There's a lot of time and commitment, I'm sure, to get a different degree, a couple years of hard work, and that might not immediately pay off. So there's also some sort of like long-term thought process to, okay, and this is probably more in the younger generation of people, I'll throw myself in there. You know, I have 20, 30 years in the working environment, so to speak, if you just follow history. So if it takes me 3, 4, 6, 7 years to benefit from investing my own capital today, well, I would say that's probably a good risk. It's not going to come overnight, which means it's going to be difficult to stick with that vision and passion. But for sure, it's an important thing to consider, even if you're not a business owner. That I agree.
Yeah, right. So, it's more just let's look at the lay of the land and where is the best use of this profit, assuming, of course, you have a profit margin, you have a savings rate, and you have additional money. Like, where's the best place to allocate this so that it grows over time? And this is how you're kind of going to compound your wealth over time and not be so, you know, there's only one thing, because there could be a number of things, especially if you start thinking about it a little bit more, and you'll find yourself being pretty creative about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if you're in a situation where you have, you know, maybe you've came out of high debt, maybe this is education debt, maybe it's credit card. Obviously, we came out of a rough year for a lot of people, 2020. So there might be lingering debt. If you do have the ability, you know, it might be just paying off debt, which sucks. It's not fun. Right. It's kind of like it's way more spending the money, swiping it, than having to shell out cash that you may have. But, you know, we see and have even had credit cards that are 15, 20, 25%. So knocking some of that out quickly that's a pretty big return on investment, so to speak.
So, absolutely. Yeah. Not fun, but yeah, for sure.
No, not fun. Cool. Well, I think that was a great topic. Thank God for Warren Buffett and the lessons we all learn throughout his life. It's a good thing. I think we can all apply it to us. Thanks for joining us again on this Tuesday chat. We'll see you next week.
Cool. Bye, Dave.
See ya.